So much happening around the world that is both fascinating and disturbing. I'm joined by foreign policy expert Dr Keith Suter again. Good to talk to you again, Keith. Can we start in Indonesia, where there's been this another shocking instance of Christians being murdered in Sulawesi? It would seem to be obviously an Islamist attack, but there seems to be denial about any terrorist motive.
Well, it certainly, in my view, was a terrorist attack. And it's worth bearing in mind that even though the Islamic State is no longer a state as such, in Iraq and Syria, it's becoming a franchised outfit with a number of groups that are joining in, claiming to have links back to the Islamic State. And I think that's one of the groups that's now operating in Sulawesi and so causing this problem. So it's very worrying that we do, in fact, have, therefore, off branches of the Islamic State immediately to Australia's north.
Yeah, and for those obvious reasons, it's something Australia can ill afford to take its eyes off of. We've been the Indonesian authorities have been cooperating greatly with Australia in combating extremism in the country, and we've got to keep at that.
Absolutely. So Australia has been of great assistance to advising Indonesia. They were slow to recognise that they had a problem, I've got to say. That was a few years ago before the Bali bombing. As a result of the Bali bombing, the Indonesians are far more aware that they have problems which they've got to pay attention to, and therefore Australia can cooperate in terms of intelligence and training, etc. Clearly, this is going to be an ongoing problem. There is a long war going on, and we are part of it, but we're the collateral damage. We're not the Christian groups are not the main target. It's really the Islamic world just trying to sort out its various factions. It's going to run on for an awfully long time yet, but you do end up with other people who end up as collateral damage. In this case, it's the Christian community of Indonesia.
Let's flip to the other side of the world now, and the UK, where Boris Johnson has his hands full. Not only is he trying to manage this Brexit process, which is extraordinarily difficult, but also the COVID-19 restrictions and a new tier system in the UK. How is all this unfolding?
But it's very difficult because the people who are complaining most about his restrictions are actually his power base within the Conservative Party. They're the more libertarian ones, the ones that don't believe in so much government control, and yet he is having to impose government control, much against his own inner best judgment, but in order to try to combat COVID. The problem is Britain is now washed with COVID fatigue. I'm in touch with a lot of people back in Britain. They're all sick of all of this. There's no easy way out. We're heading into a cold Christmas, which means, therefore, that the disease will spread as people socialise more indoors. So he's got a real problem on his hands there. And we're seeing that elsewhere in Europe, you know, with Germany, Sweden, etc. This is a real problem. And then on top of that, he's got Brexit to sort out. Remember, Britain is now out of the European Union. That was at the beginning of the year. They would spend this year working out a transition arrangement. The transition arrangement would therefore see Britain negotiating a new trading arrangement with the European Union, which is its major customer, so that by the beginning of next year, there will be a new trading regime. This has still not been negotiated. The deadline was back in October because whatever is negotiated has to go to 27 other parliaments. So obviously we're running into the holiday season.
Good luck.
We're getting very pushed. Exactly. That's the worry that the government has now got. But Boris Johnson said he is not going to ask for an extension. He wants to get it all done by the end of the year. But you see, if it's not done, then on the 1st of January, suddenly all the British exports into the European Union will be governed by what are called the General World Trade Organization regulations, which mean there's a dramatic increase in tariffs on all of those imports, plus a huge amount of more red tape and checking at Dover or Calais or whatever. It's going to be an absolute nightmare. So you've got Britain with the worst economic record in terms of an economic downturn for 300 years. You've got to go back to what's called the Great Frost 3 centuries ago to see such a sudden decline in the British economy. And then on top of that, you've also got the confusion over Brexit, and the government's still not sorting out what's going to happen there. It's going to be a very bleak Christmas for the British this year.
Now, Keith, we could talk about China and Australia's relationship with China for hours, but I want to get an answer from you on this point, and that is, are we seeing an extra bellicose China? We know they've been pretty rampant for the last few years, but they seem particularly rampant at the moment. Are they deliberately taking advantage of a bit of a power vacuum in the US because of the indecision over the transition?
I don't think they're exploiting that. I think they're exploiting other things, and this sort of in-your-face diplomacy, which they're now following. Remember when they began the revolution 40 years ago under Deng Xiaoping, it was to be everybody remaining calm as China returns to an important place in the global economy, which it had 400 or 500 years ago. So China has undergone this revolution, but the current leader is saying we don't need to be so polite in future. We can now just start to exert some of the economic muscle that we have got. Australia has fallen out with China, and as also Canada and Norway. It's almost a pattern to this. At a time when China, if it were really rational, would be seeking to protect brand China because of the adverse publicity of COVID, etc. Instead, Xi has got this crash through a crash mentality, and so wants to just plough ahead and annoy traditional partners.
Great insight as ever, Keith. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.